sea can be a cruel mistress. Uncontrollable, unpredictable, relentless. Its waves crashing with unyielding force, capable of swallowing whole ships along with the many lives on board, without remorse. No matter the skill or canny nature of the captain, the sea remains unforgiving, reminding all who dare to traverse its waters of the risks and challenges that come with confronting the untamed forces of nature. The 19th century saw a tremendous investment in Britain's harbours as part of the more general demand for faster, more efficient transportation, generated by the Industrial Revolution, and one main area of concern, which received both public and parliamentary attention, was the provision of harbours of refuge. And under mounting public pressure, a royal commission was set up in 1858 to inquire into such harbours. At the time, over 700 sailors were being lost every year, and in 1863, 2,000 ships found their way down to the murky depths. While recognising that the causes of loss of life and property at sea were complex, involving weather, incompetence, overloading and so on, the Commission felt that a good case had been made for establishing new harbours of refuge, and recommended 10 sites. One of them was Peterhead. There was a call from harbours at Arbroath, Aberdeen, Stonehaven, but Peterhead's South Harbour was chosen as the best location. There were a number of reasons. The fishing had been carried out here for centuries, and by the mid-19th century the herring fishing was important to the town, and whaling and sealing and white fishing were also carried out. All of these fishing boats needed a safe harbour in which to shelter. Its position midway between the natural harbours of the Firth of Forth and Cromarty led on to seal the deal. David Stevenson, engineer, first produced plans for the development of the harbour in 1858, wherein it was decided to build a prison in order to employ convict labour in the harbour's construction. In 1886, an Act of Parliament was finally passed, allowing the prison to be built. Because of the amount of time that had elapsed from the original conception, vast changes were made to the original plans and layouts of the Harbour of Refuge. At first, there were meant to be 2 entrances instead of 1, but the final design, of what we see today, encloses the entirety of the bay, giving a larger area of deep water, some 300 acres in total. So, there was a plan in place, the designs were finalised, the labourers were soon to arrive in the form of prisoners, and now all we needed was the materials. And luckily enough, they too were on the doorstep. The coastal fringe between Bodham and Cruden Bay had over 20 quarries, producing the best weathering red granite, a material which had been exported from the 1790s onwards. Stirling Hill was the most extensively worked, and Stirling Village grew as a result of the granite works that were built here by Heslop, Wilson & Co. when they opened their first quarry at Stirling Hill in 1858. Thomas Telford himself, that great institution of Scottish engineering, famous for harbours, bridges and the Caledonian Canal, had hailed the quality of the granite as very proper for wharfs, piers and harbours. The granite was not only desired for its hardiness, but also its beauty. There was a demand for monumental purposes and for ornamental frontages of public buildings. At the time when there were only 3 granite polishing works in the world, Peterhead joined the profession and work began at Invernetty. And further works were carried out upon the site of the now Peterhead Academy, whereby granite polishing was conducted by the great North of Scotland Granite Company, whose work has been incorporated in many prestigious buildings in Britain's capital, such as Covent Garden, the Foreign Office, and Australia House. The original fountains of Trafalgar Square were made in Aberdeen from Peterhead granite, and the Duke of Wellington's statue at Buckingham Palace stands on a pedestal of Peterhead granite. The skills of the workers who produced the monumental stone were also exported around the world. Men went to Australia to dress the stonework for Sydney Harbour Bridge, to Cape Town, South Africa, and Vermont, USA. Many granite workers from this area settled in these distant places, spreading the influence of northeast Scotland across the globe. Peterhead Prison was completed in an operation by 1888, whereby the hordes of criminals, whom until that time had been sent to England, now found themselves in the desolate, wind-swept northeast corner of Peterhead, far from home, and far from anything really, except the stinging, biting North Sea winds, the lash upon the back, and the wrong end of a prison officer's rifle. Peterhead was Scotland's only penal prison, a labour camp, a place where your keep must be earned, and with pain and blood and salty sweat their debts were paid to society for the next 70 years. The prisoners were brought to the quarries by means of a railway, some 2.5 miles long, the first state-owned passenger-carrying railway in Britain. Despite its short length, the railway had a viaduct of several granite spans, a steel girder bridge across the Turnpike Road, 2 masonry overbridges, and substantial embankments and cuttings. Prisoners were carried in 4 purpose-built secure coaches. Prison warders carried cutlasses, while guards with rifles were positioned at the quarry. 4 engines were available to pull the wagon loads of granite to the Admiralty Yard, or directly to the barge harbour, or the South Breakwater itself. In 1910, a smaller railway was also built to assist in the construction of the North Breakwater. Looking at the breakwaters today, they may seem unremarkable, but in reality they are an achievement of engineering excellence. Come high tide, perhaps only a few feet of these harbour walls are visible, but at the harbour mouth, the water is more than 10 fathoms deep. That is over 60 feet, or 5 double-decker buses. They are 3/4 of a mile long, and it was estimated that about 500,000 tons of granite was used in their construction. Every foundation poured, and each block placed by the Titan crane, a custom-made behemoth capable of carrying 60 tons upon 32 wheels at 24 feet a minute, had to be supervised by divers, and each diver relied on a team to back him up, for his life depended on them. The suddenness of stormy weather hampered progress, so divers could only operate from May to September, and across this span of time we saw 2 world wars, from 1889 until the last main block laid on the 27th of September 1956, and completion of the round towers in 1959-60, was a full 70 years of work, and 100 years since the project was originally considered. Some of the employees, including several divers, posed for a commemorative photograph on the completion of the Harbour of Refuge project, and to think that Queen Victoria was still on the throne when work had begun, at a time when most ships were at the mercy of the wind and the waves. But by the time it was finished, wind had given way to steam, and steam to diesel. Powered ships did not require a harbour of refuge. Modern advances had left the project superfluous. But alas, the 1970s brought with it the discovery of North Sea oil. Then, everything changed. Finally, the harbour earned its keep and justified its massive cost. But what of the quarries? What of the prisoners? And what of the prison? Nowadays there is only one quarry still in action, run by Breedon Aggregates. The others are now disused, other than by some local scuba diving clubs. And the prison? Well, Over time, it became the home of some of the worst criminals in Scotland, the worst of the worst, and conditions inside appropriately matched their transgressions. Originally designed to hold 208 prisoners, its occupancy rarely steeped that low, with an average population of 350 within its peak in 1911, reaching 455. 3 or 4 violent prisoners to a tiny, cold granite cell. No plumbing, no toilets, only a bucket, which could be slopped out in the morning. 23 hours a day kept locked up in your cell. A freezing cold shower was provided once every 2 weeks. A regimented affair of water on, soap off, before being carted back to your cell. Misbehaviour was not tolerated, and many a prisoner found themselves under the lash. 10, 20, 30 strikes upon the back, the cat o' nine tails thirsty for blood of the guilty. An evil place, for punishment and retribution. If you were sent to Peterhead, you had fallen as low as you could go. Scotland's gulag, the hate factory, the place where no man wished to go, but many served their time. The stories of these people, the most famous of which have been covered many times, and so I will not repeat which has already been aptly done. This is an institution that begs to be experienced in person, and luckily enough, now you can. The prison closed its doors in 2013, with conditions not much improved from its conception in 1888. But now it has become one of Scotland's jewels in the crown, a 5-star attraction, a museum to be enjoyed by ages young and old, and one you should truly all experience. If you're interested in the history, the stories, or are just curious of how bad conditions truly were, then make your way to the Peterhead Prison Museum. I had the pleasure of taking a guest here whom remarked that the similarities between here and the infamous prison island of Alcatraz were uncanny. A brutalistic granite fortress tucked way up here in the northeast of Scotland, where nobody can hear you scream.